Madness in Shakespeare's Hamlet, theme analysis. Shakespeare's works are some of the most influential pieces of literature, impacting the styles and themes of poems and novels in the following centuries. One of the themes often reflected in the author's works is madness, and the tragedy of Hamlet is the most known example of exploring one's conscious and subconscious mind. In this play, the idea of madness is depicted in several characters, mainly Hamlet and Ophelia, juxtaposing their loss and contrasting their behavior. While the narrative about Hamlet's madness is intentionally ambiguous to show the complexity of his struggle and the uncertain morality of his deeds, Ophelia loses her sanity earnestly, indicating the purity of her soul and her unformed identity. A summary of events is vital for explaining the motives and actions of the main characters. As Hamlet returns to Denmark for his father's, the king's, funeral, he learns that his uncle, Claudius, has assumed the role of the king and married Hamlet's mother. Stricken with grief, Hamlet encounters his father's ghost, who points to Hamlet's uncle as the murderer. As Hamlet wishes to avenge his father's killer, he pretends to be insane. This scene opens the theme of madness, which follows the characters throughout the play. Later, when the frustrated Hamlet confronts his mother, he accidentally kills Ophelia's father, Polonius, who was spying in the shadows. Having learned about her father's death, Ophelia, a young woman in whom Hamlet is interested, goes mad and eventually drowns in a lake, presumably having committed suicide. Upon seeing Ophelia's body, Hamlet strengthens his resolve, asks Polonius' son, Laertes, for forgiveness, and kills Claudius before passing himself. Through the two characters, Hamlet and Ophelia, Shakespeare demonstrates the two sides of madness and how it affects the characters in similar circumstances. Both young people lost their fathers unexpectedly, but their motivations differ tremendously, influencing their behavior. First, the most complex presentation of sanity is depicted in Hamlet, who, while vowing revenge, claims that he will put an antic disposition on, meaning that he will pretend to go mad. Thus, the audience assumes that Hamlet is sane, and his nonsensical responses to other characters are a part of his plan to take revenge on Claudius. For example, in one scene, Hamlet calls Polonius, Lord Chamberlain and the father of his love interest, a fishmonger. Clearly, Hamlet knows who Polonius is and is acting to deceive people close to the king to expose his plot. Hamlet's presentation of madness is further exposed by his rational behavior and speech, which are filled with acute observations. First, Hamlet chooses to behave strangely with some characters while having regular conversations with others. As he says to Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, "I am but mad north-northwest, when the wind is southerly, I know a hawk from a handsaw." This admission exposes his intentions, to appear mad when it suits him while approaching the revenge plan with careful planning. In another interpretation, Hamlet may be warning the two men that he is still sane and can see whether he sees them as enemies. Later, Hamlet plans to expose Claudius' deeds by tricking him into seeing a play where the events of his father's death are repeated on stage. Such careful planning may also indicate that Hamlet's madness is feigned. However, even when he pretends to act like a madman, his speech is still meaningful. For instance, when Hamlet talks to Polonius, he insults him, "For you yourself, sir, should be old as I am, if, like a crab, you could go backward." While, on the surface, Hamlet's speech may appear nonsensical, the young man is covering his emotions about the characters and using metaphors to express his opinions. Notably, Polonius notices this remark and thinks how pregnant sometimes his replies are, highlighting the thin line between madness and sanity in Hamlet's speeches. Nevertheless, Polonius, like other characters, interprets Hamlet's sharp remarks as peculiarities of an insane mind. In many scenes, Hamlet presents himself as a sane character who wishes to get revenge and uses madness to reach his goal. At the same time, as the plot progresses, the reader may start doubting this assertion, as Hamlet reveals his emotional instability and the deep hurt that his father's death has brought. Although the young man argues that he is rational and logical in his pursuit, his anger and loss of control when talking to Ophelia or Gertrude, his mother, show the fragility of his sanity. One of the most notable scenes is the confrontation between Hamlet and Gertrude, during which the young man kills Polonius. First, although Hamlet wishes to stay calm during their conversation, he quickly loses his temper, which scares his mother and suggests he is not in control of his emotions. Second, he behaves erratically as he hears Polonius in the room. Without hesitation, he pierces through the arras, thinking that Claudius is behind them. In this case, one may see Hamlet's paranoia and anger toward Claudius, which clouds the man's judgment and leads him to sabotage his plan. At the same time, one may suppose that Hamlet hopes to kill Claudius incidentally, thus absolving himself from the need to create a revenge plan or act cruelly with forethought. Therefore, the question of whether Hamlet has truly gone mad remains unanswered. The main contrast to such unclear behavior is Ophelia, who quickly succumbs to madness after her father's death. Throughout the play, one can see how Ophelia's actions are dictated by men, her father, brother, and Hamlet. Arguably, Hamlet's impassioned speed about denouncing her and other women is the first point that strongly affects her, as one of the influential men is no longer supporting her. However, Polonius' death is the most devastating event to Ophelia. After losing him, she starts singing strange songs, stops talking to people, and eventually dies. The reader may interpret such degradation of sanity as a loss of Ophelia's identity, which depended on the men controlling her life. Without their control, she is lost completely, not seeing any purpose or future for herself. Although the circumstances of her death are ambiguous, it is possible that she ended her life, an act about which Hamlet merely pondered. To conclude, the theme of madness permeates the play The Tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, showing the different sides of insanity through such characters as Hamlet and Ophelia. Hamlet's behavior can be interpreted in several ways, either as cunning and calculated or irrational and filled with grief. In contrast, Ophelia's madness is sincere, influenced by the complete absence of identity without the men who controlled her life. As a result, the characters approach their lives differently. While Hamlet thinks about the value of his life, he uses insanity as a tool to further his goals. Ophelia completely loses herself to madness, not seeking justice or retribution,